Okay, for people joining this live stream, we are in the late stages of documenting and working through the design for our database connectivity framework for version 12 of Wolfram Language. And let's see. Okay, so I think the first things we have to discuss are some names of functions. And the first one of those is merged entity class, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the proposal is to change that to joined across entity class. Correct? Is that correct?
Join entity class.
I'm sorry?
No, joined across entity class was your proposal last time.
Well, does it do? I mean, I'm joined across is not my absolutely all-time favorite name, but it's the one.
Stephen, can you remind us what was your objection to merged entity class?
Because it doesn't do the same thing as merge. It does what join across does.
Yeah, but
okay, so that's the answer. I mean,
okay.
If we look at what merge does, it's something different.
Yeah, this is true, but we do not base all these names very closely after Wolfram language names of the operations.
Well, but okay, fine. But then explain to me what merged. If I look at merged entity class,
it tells you rather concisely what it does semantically, because it creates entities which have properties from both the both classes which are being merged.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the signature is actually pretty close to the one of join across.
Well, except join across is not the best name either.
Yeah.
And merge combine values with the same key.
Merging it's definitely not doing what merge is doing.
Well, explain that for a second. Okay, so let's walk through what this really does. By merging the properties of pairs of entities, what is this saying? By merging the properties of pairs of entities of class 1 and class 2 entities? Is that a mistake? Wording mistake there?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake.
The class of entities obtained by merging. Are there no examples of this thing?
Not yet.
And by merging the properties of pairs of entities, class 1. Merging the properties of pairs of entities.
So you just have an old build.
No. I just edited it. You didn't see. I just edited it. So we didn't finish this page.
It's the first time we look at it, actually.
The ones you have asterisk, you already saw it, but we still don't finish. The ones with the asterisk, you already entered.
Okay, but the ones with asterisks are ones where
you already looked at them. But
so the ones without asterisks we didn't look at all.
Yes.
Yeah, they're virgin.
Okay. Well, maybe we should go to the guide page to start off with. Oh, wow. This isn't even finished.
Nope.
Oh, shoot. Well, okay. This page comes from which other page? It's working. It comes from the general page about working with databases. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so let me find. Okay, so this page. Oh boy. So there's a bunch of stuff missing on this page as well. Okay, all right, great. Okay. Well, into action we go. All right, is this page reasonably complete? Okay, let's deal with this page first. Okay. Okay, so that's a completely wrong description at the top there. Okay, let's just well, that's rather we just need to write some text here that explains basically what the deal is. Now here, entity-based data storage. Okay, direct data storage. Okay, relational database operations. So this is it would be nice to communicate that these are, well, this is obviously read write because it has SQL update. Okay. Connection to an external, obviously. Okay, so let's see what, so first of all, I don't think there's a good reason to call this SQL database object. I think we should just call it database object. And
well, I mean, the question is really whether we want to have other types of database objects later.
Yes,
because,
but we do. But I mean, the object can self-identify what kind of a database it's dealing with.
That's very tricky.
Well, I'm sorry.
The problem is that all this stuff is going to be, I mean, already the functionality of entity store is defined across two different packlets. If we also define this database object,
are you telling me some detailed implementation thing? Look, right now
I'm telling you something about. I'm telling you something about how the current packlet manager works.
Okay, I don't care.
And there is
we're not going to change the design for the sake of some detail about how.
Well, then fix the packlet manager.
No,
but
I'm sorry.
The problem is that we cannot introduce inter-packlet dependencies like that, because then if one packlet updates and the other fails to update, we get some broken state. You can't have functions defined like that across different packlets easily.
Carl on our live stream helpfully points out that SQL database object and something like graph database object will be quite different, which is true. What is the thing that here, this is an RDF store. I mean, what is the other thing? I think we should just call this database object, and we will cross the bridge later of what, of how we dispatch the thing. You know, probably the right way to do it is to internally dispatch. I'm going to tell you implementation details. Let's not do that. Internally, you can just dispatch. You have this one function, database object, and you internally dispatch it to SQL database object or whatever else.
But Stephen, that's exactly the problem that Carlo outlined. The question is...
I don't want to hear about this. I don't want to hear about your details of packlet manager dependencies. It is not relevant.
But that's not just details, Stephen. That will affect the entire operation of things.
Okay. You know what? Are you telling me that we can't name this function the way it should be named because of some detail about how you're implementing things? That's not going to work.
No, it's about the detail about how packlets work.
Okay. It doesn't matter.
It's a pretty fundamental detail.
Okay. So the fact is, we're not going to have something other than an SQL database for a while. During that time, we're going to fix whatever it is that if you really want me to go look at the code, I'll go look at the code. I'm certain there's a way to fix it. But let's not go there. Okay, and I think this should be renamed. Yeah, Carl on our live stream is helpfully pointing out relational database object would be a reasonable thing to call this.
Absolutely, would be probably better.
Yeah, but then why do we have it called database connection? And why do we have it
because
called
database connection is not specific. Yeah. Database connection doesn't need to be specific. So the point is that the way Tony implemented things is that there is an interface for the entity store. And that's why RDF store is not called entity store, because either you call it something different or it contains an object that identifies what it is.
Okay, what else, like in the Mongo case? Right now, we have this rather weird Mongo Connect thing, right?
Mm-hmm. But we could, I mean, I've been looking at this Mongo stuff, and there is a way to subsume much of that into this. Only the SQL database object would be a Mongo database object, and it would be different.
Well, what will we call it? If this was called relational database object, what will we call the Mongo one?
We could call it Mongo.
Why? Why?
It's not a good idea. Database is called.
Yes, I understand that, but are we saying that there is no category of thing? What is it? What is the category of thing?
In the case of Mongo, it's
really
I'm sorry?
No, wait a second. Mongo, in the case of Mongo, Mongo could be relational or could be not relational. It depends on how you set it up. So you can define a Mongo database with a schema, and you can define a Mongo database without a schema.
No, but I don't think you can really define foreign keys, and this is what relation is. It's still like a
no, Riccardo, that's not what relation means. Relation means table. A relational algebra doesn't mean foreign keys.
Well, then is schema.
Carl on our live stream is pointing out that object store is kind of the category for MongoDB.
Document store, yes.
Object store.
Yeah, they're also referred at what is stored as document as well.
That's true. That's a horrible name, though. Well, this should certainly not be called SQL database object, because that even confuses it relative to all these direct SQL operations. The question of whether it should be called...
I mean, I think that the main problem
this is I think what is
Riccardo, there's no, you interrupted me. There is a difference in RDF. They make a distinction between a store, which is RDF, and the query language, which is Sparkle. In SQL, there's never been such a distinction. Like they call SQL both the stores and the query language. So.
Okay, well, look, SQL database object is clearly not the right name. So the question is, because I guess since we call this relational database operations, we could reasonably justify calling this relational database object.
That would be good enough, I think, if you are so much against the SQL database object.
I am, yeah. All right. Thank you, Carl, for helping us on that one.
We got another possible name was database schema object, because it really just contains the schema. But I'm happy with database, with relational database object as well.
Yes. All right. Well, then, so represents of the database inspect? No, it's not it's the result of database connection, isn't it?
No. Connection. Database connection works like file or URL. It's a completely lazy thing. So it's not the fact that you have a connection object doesn't even mean that the database exists. So you give database connection to database inspect, and you get back a relational database object.
Can you show me an example of? Can you send me an example, please?
Do you still have in your Dropbox that SQLite file?
I have no idea. What would it look like? What was it called?
It was called something like demo.sqlite.
There's a thing called demo.
Yeah, I saw it in the demo folder.
Okay, so what should I do with this?
Okay, open the demo notebook.
Which demo notebook?
The one that is in the same folder.
Okay.
And I think that in there, you don't need to do all that stuff anymore.
All that stuff at the top?
Yeah.
So I can just say this?
Yeah. And that will probably.
What's that?
Well, that's because of our node stuff that you have installed. But we
shouldn't
should
have it
rename that
installed.
stuff. And
Yeah.
we should. I mean, it's also an internal function that has a terrible name.
I'll fix it.
Okay. All right. Oh, that's better. All right. Okay. So now if I say database inspect of this, what is going to happen here?
You're going to have to wait a little bit because the build scripts are not yet up to date. And so it's still using Java, which has a terribly long startup time.
Okay. All right. So what is this thing now?
So that thing represents the schema. So it contains information about all the tables and all the columns in every table. Some meta information that is more general.
This is called database connection. Why isn't this called database schema?
Could be called schema. Yeah, I mean, that's another possibility. Schema doesn't quite communicate the fact that it has methods and stuff you can extract out of it. But
well, what does it have? What can I do with this now?
Yeah, it's in
documentation. So I look here, and I could say something like columns. Is that right?
No, columns. You cannot say columns. You have to say tables first. Columns.
So
for each table, you can ask columns.
Okay.
And then you can say nation columns.
So if I say down here, like this, or is it curried?
No, it's like that.
Could it be curried?
It could. No, wait. No, because when you do, well, I guess it could, but we would have something that has to return unevaluated first.
Okay, but this, I'm not sure if it's a great idea to curry it. Okay. Now, when it says tables here, is there not a symbolic representation of those tables? I mean, let's say I want to get one of those tables and turn it into a data set, for example. How would I do that?
We used to have it, but then we decided that we will always have just the schema object itself.
Okay, but so just tell me how to get one of those tables, like the nation table, into a data set.
But you want the data?
Yeah, I want a data set, which is the data of
there
that
is
table.
There is no way to extend. I mean,
no, there is a way. You can do. No, there is a way with entity value. You can register the whole thing, and then say. So if you register, so now do this entity register of entity store of schema.
What's the entity store?
Entity store of schema. Open square bracket schema. And now, if you want, now you can do entity value of nation, and then entity property association maybe, and then dataset.
Or just dataset in the second.
Just dataset works. Okay.
Okay. So those are basically foreign keys to another table. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Well, reverse foreign keys, but yes. They are foreign keys in the other table to this one. That's why they're entity classes and not in single entities.
Okay. This flow seems like it should be an easier one to do. That is, and by the way, okay, let me just ask you for the examples, how are we representing that SQLite thing? Is it from example data, or how are we actually presenting it for examples?
So we're putting a cleaned up version.
But how is it going to be accessed? Through examples or something else?
I think that the current consensus is that it's going to work just like the things that are in import. And so it's going to be something like file example data / database.sqlite.
Okay. Okay. It would be really good if we could get that in there so that we can actually start playing with these things.
Mm-hmm.
And writing the examples. Ben on our live stream is saying that the entity value comma dataset will work on all entity stores. That's very helpful. I agree. It's a nice feature, and I'm not sure why we're. So, are you telling me if I say entity value of, for example, cat breed, comma dataset, what will I get here? Will I get a giant thing with a bunch of pictures of cow? Oh my God. Okay. So it will turn it into a data set, basically.
Yes.
Do we document that?
That should be documented. Yes.
Let's take a look. By the way, we should also make this into some kind of workflow so people have a fighting chance. Okay. Oh, wow. You know, whoever wrote this violates our principles about how these things should be written. How did this get written? I don't even know. Okay, so that's wrong because this is actually the second argument, and you didn't document that.
So those strings like property association or data set or even association, they can appear in the second or third argument.
Well,
If they
doesn't say that. Doesn't say it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we got a different issue here. Okay. So is this, by the way, these things here are all irrelevant now. Is that true or not?
The third one is still relevant, and the first two ones don't seem relevant.
The first two here?
Correct. I'm not sure if it's explicitly said anywhere that you can have an entity class in the first argument of entity value.
Well, that's something we certainly should update with the newer stuff.
Agreed.
Like entity class and all the entity class like heads. It's actually the preferred way of using them rather than turning them into entities first.
Well, okay, but what does it give you for the entity class?
Basically the same as if you had supplied the list of entities.
Right. So in fact, this documentation isn't really right. So we should say, gives a value of the specified property. So for an entity here, it's equivalent. This is equivalent to entity open bracket property, correct? Right?
Yes.
But it doesn't say that here.
It's actually the opposite. It's entity open square bracket property, which is a shorthand of that.
I understand. I understand. We don't say it here, though. Okay, so we got multiple points to make here. Because the value of specified property for the given entity, entity of property is equivalent to entity value, entity property. Now, I think that's what we have to say.
Well, you should then, I think that if possible, I would really like the second usage message to say something about class-like.
I'm going to say that. I'm going to say it.
Yeah, and then in details, you should say that that doesn't only apply to entity.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. Hold on.
Okay.
I mean, this is a mess, what we have here. So, this is the next thing to say, right? And that property gives a list of the values of the specified property for all entities in the specified class. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, now the next thing we want to document, how can we have so what happens if you give a list of entities here? Actually, maybe we should document second that case of entity 1, entity 2 property. Okay.
I think it's better if that comes after class, because we want to give people, otherwise people think that the more canonical form is to get the entities out first, which they should not try to do, if possible.
That assumes that you always start with a class.
Yeah, which you don't necessarily. I think we should do it this way. We can say that one shouldn't do this for, I mean, hold on a second, property. Now I'm going to ask the question, when you have this case here, which is first, which is the table, which are the rows, which are the columns?
It's the outer product of the two lists.
Okay. Yeah, but the entity is first.
Okay, all right, okay.
If you get the first, you get a row of properties.
Okay. Gives the list of values.
Which makes me wonder, shouldn't we have a modifier that does the transpose for packing purposes? Like column-oriented should be more efficient in many cases.
Yes, but we are trying to get a bunch of column-oriented functions created, and that's a separate discussion. Gives the list of values of the specified property for each of the entity I. Now, somebody's going to ask, what order are they going to come out in for the class? That's the thing which is an issue here. Okay, gives the list of values of the specified property. For all entities in the specified class. Okay, now we have to say, okay, here we want to say, let's say ent.
Basically, it gives a list of property values for each entity.
I know, but let's first of all gives the list of values of the property I for the specified entity. And then the final case is entity value of ents, comma. So here, you know what, I would prefer to say, yeah, okay, all right. All right, fine. We can just say property 1. So now tell me what this gives. Gives a list of the values of the property I. Gives the list of values of the property I. Well, no, wait a minute. Is it a list?
Well, maybe you should not say ents. You should say something like, I mean, because it's like it subsumes either one entity or a list of entities.
No. I just did the one entity case right here.
Yeah, but then it subsumes the other two both.
I don't care what it subsumes. We're talking about the multiple entity case here. Okay? This is the multiple entity case. So just tell me which way around it is. It is the outermost list is the entities, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so a list for each entity.
Gives the list of values of the property I for each. Gives a list of the values of the property I gives the list of the values of the property I for each of the entities represented by ents. That right? Is that easy to understand which way around it is talking about?
I think so.
What
Yes.
the heck just happened there? I don't know why the spell checker still thinks it's active on this. Okay. Okay, so now here, this is irrelevant. Why is this even in here? I don't understand why this is in here. This is irrelevant to this.
Agreed.
Well, now you should add a detail that says something. We should have a detail that says that in entity value class property, class can be one of the following heads.
Which are what?
Which are entity class, sorted entity class, sampled entity class, extended entity class, joined across entity class, filtered entity class, etc., etc., etc. Aggregated.
What is this nonsense here? This is clearly wrong. What is this? This is nonsense. Okay. By the way, is it the case that this can be a pure, that can be entity value of a quoted string of an entity type? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a shorthand for.
Okay, so you didn't document that.
No.
This is a mess. I'm sorry, I'm kind of upset about this. Are these other ones a mess as well? This is just nonsense. I mean, it's just nonsense, right?
I don't think it's nonsense. They are from the time when we originally wrote them, and a lot has changed in them, but originally, Ellen, you, me, we all looked at them.
Yeah, okay. Well, this clearly needs a complete rewrite. Okay, all right, let's come back.
So we were saying that we need to say something that in the entity value class, comma, property.
Just a second, I need to get okay, sorry, go ahead. So this is this needs a bunch of, okay, let's just unravel our stack for a second here. So we're doing this. Now, the thing we were looking at before was this relational database object. And what we were looking at, by the way, someone on our live stream asks the very reasonable question, what does import of demo.sqlite do? What does that import do? If you just import the thing, what does it do?
Well,
presumably it should create an entity store. Presumably it should return an entity store.
I mean, that's debatable because there are two problems. First of all, is that it's not importing the whole thing, so you don't get the full data out.
Why isn't it importing the whole thing? What if you just told it to import the whole thing?
Wait. So I think it should have elements, and we should decide what the default element is. You might want to get the raw data out without anything wrapping it, just as an association of associations, or a list of associations, actually.
Well, are you saying that you might want to get something which is just the schema description and not?
Yeah, so it should have like an element that is the relational database object, another element that is the entity store.
Wait a minute, could it have? Wait a minute, is it possible for it to have the relational database object because it would then still have to refer to the external file, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but the relational database object has it still contains the database connection.
Okay, but let me point out that if import string is then not equivalent to import. Because what's that? If you take the bytes of the SQLite file, you're telling me that relational database object cannot point to something in memory. That's what you're basically saying.
It can. As a matter of fact, it's actually a yet different case because SQLite supports databases that are completely in memory.
Okay,
but they would be empty if you cannot write to them. So,
okay.
But anyway, we can add stuff for import. I guess there would be a bunch of different possible elements you can get out of an SQLite file, including the full data as just raw stuff or a data set.
Okay. Look, hold on. Let's go back to this documentation because we need to. Okay. So this should be. So it's either entity there or it's entity class, right?
Where entity? No, it's class, generic class, which is one of the new heads that we are.
I'm sorry. What class is that?
So class can be either entity class or sorted entity class or sampled entity class, extended entity class, etc., etc.
Okay.
So.
Okay, is equivalent to entity value of ent. When ent.
Yeah, but why don't you make a different detail where you say in entity value class, comma, property, class can be, and then we put a table with the things.
Okay.
And they link to the other.
Entity value ent, comma, dot, dot, dot. Ent can be any of the following.
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing it can be
is entity.
Is an explicit is just entity. So it just be entity of type, or do we not even say what it is of?
Just put dot 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 because the first argument can be a complex class itself.
Right. A single entity. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Next, entity class.
No. Next, probably list of entities.
Well, okay. No, let's put that as a generic because that we can have a list of entity classes as well. So let's not.
I don't know if we can.
Well, why don't you tell me what it can do with entity class here? So this is entity class, right?
Mm-hmm. And that would say something like a named or implicit entity class.
Okay, what else can it be?
Sorted entity class.
Well, wait a minute. Can't it be any of those kinds of entity classes?
Yeah, it can. Yeah. I was just going to list them. I don't know what you want to start with. But.
Yeah, okay. But can't it be an entity function on the outside of all of this stuff?
No, the second argument can be an entity function.
Okay, so then the next thing we're going to say is in entity value of ent comma prop can be any of the following.
Mm-hmm.
So among the things that, so wait a minute, you also can have a type name here, right? Independent of a single entity, an entity class, and then somewhere at the bottom of all of this is, so you've got a bunch of these kinds of things like sorted entity class, etc., right? Oh, what the heck just happened here? Why is this, there's some bug here? This jumped. What is this doing? Do you see what this did? Could somebody, that's humorous, but not useful, right? Every time I add something to this, it's jumping down to some other part of the document. Could,
yes,
let's see.
I can report it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, now somewhere at the bottom of all of this, we want to give both the list case. Well, you're saying that I should document the multiple a list of entities at the top here, you think?
And it would follow the usage messages. I'm not a big fan of the list of entities, to be honest, but sure, why not?
Well, why don't we put it at the bottom? I mean, there's also the type, which is all entities of a given type, right?
Or meta properties of the type.
Say that again, what do you mean?
It means that, for example, if you ask for properties, you don't get, I mean, that's also kind of an exception to the shape of what you get out. So.
Okay, but hold on, that's a completely different thing. What we're saying here is there's a list of entities, and it cannot be a list of entity classes, apparently, right?
No, it can't.
It cannot. Okay.
I mean, we will. I think in the future we want to add something like entity joined entity class and union entity class and intersected entity class and complemented entity class to do set operations on multiple entity classes, but not naked.
All right. So then this thing here, all entities of the given type, of the specified type, right? Okay, so here we've got all of these other things, the merge, the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so now,
there are a couple of other things, I think, like dated entity group.
Down here?
In the first one.
In this one? Why is dated? Is dated something relevant here?
You can date an entity also, as well as a property.
Okay, so what
I don't know the...
So what are the other things?
I don't know exactly what they are because Tony...
So there's dated and geo variant. And there's... Those both are wrappers. And then there's another category like entity group and entity copies.
Which one is the one that is qualified with a quantity? Like what if you want 1 gram of flour?
Entity instance, which is some mixture of all of them.
So wait a minute. So you're saying that in this table, we should be adding, so let's make a note because the stupid thing is going to jump like crazy. Entity instance, entity group, entity copies, also dated and geovariant.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, arguably what we should have is the relational things at the top, followed by this list, all entities specified by type. Then we should go into the entity instance stuff, do you think? What do you think? Or do you think that should, I don't think we want to distract with the entity instance right at the top.
Yes, they're somehow different things, so could be two categories.
As a matter of fact, maybe we should split this and say something like, because entity instance is something that you can put in a list of entities. Like it works, it quacks like an entity, not like an entity class. So you can put it in a list.
Okay. But what about the other ones, like entity group?
Entity group, it works like single entity, right?
Yes.
Okay, so by default, these ones will behave like a single entity. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, well, dated can be wrapped around entity class as well, right?
Yes.
No, but I'm saying in terms of the value that comes out, a certain set of things will give a single value and other sets of things will give a list of values.
Yes, except for the wrappers like dated, that in which case it depends on what the wrapped are.
I understand. Okay, so let's see. Okay. Entity value. Well, here, if we say property here, the following, okay, if I say in entity value of ent comma property, the following forms for ent give a single value as a result. Okay, whereas then we would say give a list of values as a result. Is that a reasonable thing to say? Okay, so now here, I'm going to put a whole bunch of these in since this isn't jumping down for whatever reason. Okay. So then the first thing that goes there, these two things both go there, right? And this goes there, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now here, a single entity. All right, so now what's the next thing here? It'll be like an entity instance, right?
We could also follow some graphics documentation where we say the following wrappers can be used. Because dated is a wrapper that can wrap a single or multiple things.
I know, but that's a separate thing. It's a separate place. Okay, we can deal with that separately. Okay, let's I'm asking for this table here. What are we giving? We're giving entity, then entity instance, entity group, etc. Is that correct? Is that correct?
So entity instance of a list of entities.
No, I'm not. What?
It would not give a single result.
What about entity group?
Yes.
That will give a single result?
Yes.
Well, can't you give an entity group of a list of entities as well?
Yes, entity group of a list or a class of entities.
Okay, look. This doesn't talk about entity classes, does it? It needs to. Okay, so are you telling me that the only thing which gives a single, entity instance of an entity, right? That will give a single result.
Yes.
Correct? Okay, as will all those other ones, as will dated of an entity, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, is there anything other than just an individual entity or one of these wrappers that will give a single result?
Entity copies.
I'm sorry, that's a wrapper. That's a wrapper around entity, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the question again. Is there anything this is a single named entity, right? It cannot be an implicit entity. Correct?
It could be an implicit entity.
No, it could not be an implicit entity because an implicit entity is an entity class.
An implicit entity is an entity class with an aggregation applied to it.
Okay, so let's be specific then. We have to break this out about whether it's an entity with a name or an implicit entity. Am I making sense?
We could just say a single entity.
No, because we got to tell people what to do. Am I making sense? Okay.
I think all the things with that entity should behave in a certain way, and the entity ref page specifies how you can specify single entities.
Say that again. What?
I think that all the things with that entity should behave in a certain way, independent of how they are specified, either by name or by a list of conditions. So that's why I think it's up to the entity ref page to list all the ways you can specify a single entity.
All right. So in this list of properties here, this is again going to be a, Ethan on our live stream is saying we should think about adding a tutorial. All these functions are extremely confusing. Yeah, we know it's complicated. Do we have a tutorial coming for this stuff?
Workflow, yes. Also tutorial, maybe. Yeah, why not?
Well, there's two different things. One is the whole Tony-related entity store stuff, and the other is all the interactions with relational databases.
Actually, we wanted to discuss that with you separately, Stephen, because we need some place where we would show how to use the query language for the databases and how it translates into primitives known in databases. And obviously for just the entity framework part is not the right place where we can put it.
Heck no. No. So look, that's exactly what our Tech Note series is supposed to be for. That's what it should be. We don't really have things called tutorials in quotes anymore. We have Tech Notes and monographs. So depending on the scope, it's either a Tech Note or a monograph. That sounds like a Tech Note to me.
Yeah, like mostly, I don't know how you would categorize it, but imagine that we need mostly kind of a guide for the query language. What would it be? Tech Notes?
I'm sorry, what are you talking about? Are you talking about our query language? Or are you talking about translation to SQL?
No, we are talking about our query language, but the thing is that for databases, we can't compile everything, so we'll have to explain how to use it. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
like a tech note to me. So
okay.
look, you just have to write it.
Yeah, I'll gladly write it. I just needed to know what category it should belong to.
Yeah, okay. Okay. The name of a property, right, can be any of the following. A property, the property with a specified name for the type of entity. A property is, I mean, this is with a specified name for the type of entity that we're dealing with, right?
Yes.
That's fine. Then there's entity property, which normally has a type as its first argument. Is that correct? Or can it have other things as its first argument?
A type.
That's all. It cannot have a computed
No,
type.
no. It can have, wait. It can have a computed type. It's not necessarily a string.
Well, that second part is a string, correct? Is that correct?
The second argument is always a string.
Okay. Now, the property here, oh gosh, stupid bug. Okay, so these properties also can have things like dated wrappers, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you think, all right, so the following form for ent gives a single entity as a result. So that's just a, this is just the only such thing. So actually, I mean, I think we should put it in here. So then this becomes, oh, for goodness sake. There's just a thing that says here, a single entity. Then we go an entity class. Okay, so most likely this is a nothing. Following forms for ent can be used. Okay, so then we get all these things like sorted entity class and so on. Okay. The following wrappers can be used to well, so that basically is going to be a table, entity instance, entity group, entity copies, and then dated and geovariant. Right, and then there's going to be wrappers for this one as well, correct? Because the entity, the entity variance, oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so this is, we say things like entity instance of ent. Oh, comma, and then it's got properties there, right? It's got the instancing information. Particular instance of ent, e.g. quantity of, etc. Okay. So then we've got entity group. What does entity group do again? What does it take as an argument?
A list or class of entities.
Okay, so entity copies we can give earlier.
Yes, it's so to say a special.
And how many does it have? Just n?
Yes.
Modified entities and entity classes. And copies. Okay. All right. Entity group, what does that take?
A list or class of entities.
What does it mean?
It means if you have, for instance, two entities with an extensive mass, then the group has the sum of the masses as mass.
Okay. Representation. Well, this should be a single entity formed from the group of entities ents. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So then we have the dated and geovariant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, we'll worry about how those are. Is that it? Or are there other modifiers?
I think it's it, but I check.
Okay. All right. Now, when we get down here, by the way, this isn't right, right? This is ents props annotation, correct? That last thing here. Right?
Yes. Yes, I think the list of entity wrappers is complete.
Okay. Okay. Well, should we say an annotation? Annotation of the value, or what should we say there?
Yes, it's an annotation of the value. Correct. So, but there are different concepts. So right now, the entity association, property association, they are also listed annotations, and this might be confusing. With annotation, we mean things like the date at which a particular value was measured.
No, that's terrible. The thing you just mentioned is terrible. So I don't know whether this should be called annotation. We mean something completely different by annotation elsewhere. It's a result type, basically.
No, it's a result property.
Well, it's the, what are you saying? It's the property of the property?
It's the property of the property value.
Well, let's see some examples. So that's probably not the right thing there. So let's just put a little XXX there so we know that.
So basically there are two types of examples.
Okay, but hold on. Down here, these are things that can go in the second argument. Is that correct?
Yes.
So this is nonsense, basically. What? Are you sure that this should be the same function?
In general, we could have an entity type value, entity class value, and so on.
No, I'm asking whether entity properties, for example, isn't that, we don't have that, we do. What does that do?
Gives a list of properties of a type.
So that's equivalent to, why is this taking forever? Why is that taking forever? That's equivalent to this weird entity value. Okay, so among other things, it's equivalent to the properties subvalue, right? We should figure out why this is taking forever in this version. Oh, something came back. Why did it take forever? You should check into that. Something is wrong there. Make sense? Yes, can you check into that? Do I need to send mail about this?
Yeah, we can check.
Okay, I mean, something is wrong. Probably Nick's caching system is not doing the right thing for this case, would be my guess. Okay, in any case, what we haven't said here this equivalence between entity, the subvalue thing, needs to be emphasized more. Because for most of these, that will just work, right? Am I making sense?
Yes. And there's also the reverse subvalue property of entity.
Yeah, but that doesn't work for the string case.
Correct. And also not if you have a list of entities.
So in each of these things, like sorted entity class, we probably should document the subvalue piece. Right? So like with entity, we certainly need to document the subvalue. Do we? Yeah, I mean, this should be an entity without the double quotes there for the type. And we also desperately need to document. Okay, well, we do document that. Okay. I don't think we should say this. Is it even true? I mean, is that going to be true when you have constructed entities? Is that just a hack for this particular case? Tony?
You mean this list of types?
Yes.
Those are things that we call now something like base types. And they are
but that's not, this is the total hack that entity value open close returns this, correct?
No, I don't think it's a total hack.
It is. The analogy is originally when we, with the data packlets, we usually return a list of things to start with. That means in the case of...
Yeah, I know, like country data, open, close, I understand.
Or coordinate transform data, you get a thing to start with. An entity value is, so to say, a super thing of those things where you get the list of types.
Well, I think that this would be nice and symmetric if entity list was just entity value with one argument.
Okay. All right. So I want to come back to, so we're going to, this page is a mess. We're going to need to do it, but we need to zoom out for a second into this page here. And actually, the page we were starting on, we're even zooming out further because we're starting on the page about databases in general. Okay. So we need to rewrite this, obviously. But let's not do that right now because we've probably got higher priority things to do, but that needs to be done. Okay. Andrea, who's PMing here?
Andrea.
Okay. So you need to make sure you have that on the list, please. And for the next time we meet, I want to have a boom, boom, boom. This is the specific list of things that we know we have to do. Okay. So, okay, relational database. Is the word operations the right word?
Because I think so for now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So database inspect. What is database inspect really? And is that the right word for it?
I think it is. I mean, cannot really think about a better one. It's actually doing this operation of doing several queries in order to know what's inside it. So.
No, I know, but really what it's going to do is it's going to return a relational database object. So inspect suggests to me that it will bring up a GUI, which is not what it's doing at all, right?
In that sense, yes.
Right, and I believe that there's even in this database explorer thing is a GUI, right, to do something similar to database inspect. So
that should be a GUI, yes. Mm-hmm. Well, there is a first argument for this guy that allows you to select. Actually, it's a second argument: table, table, table. So maybe we can have something that says interactive goes to true in the future, and I don't know. It's showing to you a GUI and lets you.
I think it's a different function. I mean, this particular function. I don't really believe in the name of this function. I think it's just the wrong name. I think it suggests something completely different. Okay, this is the wrong name. What it actually does is to return this thing, and I don't even think that's the right name. Because what that is, if I'm understanding correctly, is that is a handle to what? A particular element of the relational database, right? Either a table or...
It represents some meta information about the database. That would be correct statement. And it has methods to extract specific information about the objects in of the database, such as tables or columns, etc.
Right. What is database inspect? I don't think it's what you think it is, so to speak.
Do we have something similar in the system?
I don't understand why it isn't just a relational database object applied to the database connection. What is it doing that's any different from that?
There is the second argument is important. When you have like a huge database, sometimes it like with 100 tables, maybe even more, you need to select manually what are the tables that you want to get back. Otherwise, it will take forever.
Okay. Well, why don't you just put that in the second argument of relational database object? And that returns, so in other words, it's relational database object of the database connection.
Yes. Stephen, there is one potential problem with that, which is that we were thinking of a relational database object as being a completely inert representation of things without any evaluation semantics. And if we have a construct...
Yeah, but it doesn't make any sense to have a function that has a name that suggests it does something completely different, that all it does is to go from the database connection to the relational database object.
It's not really a critical feature, database inspect, but I would like to have a function that allows you to select just a list of tables, because sometimes it happens.
Great, we need that. Okay, but so maybe this has the wrong name. Okay. So first of all, why is database connection specific? What the heck is that? What the heck is that? Look, if this is specifically for a relational database and not for something else, it shouldn't be called database connection.
But Stephen, for this one, we might be able later to generalize to non-relational databases, because this one has fewer constraints in terms of how to extend it, and it will be far easier to do than for, say, relational database object to extend to other types. So this one will be fine to become more general in the future.
Okay. So, but what we get returned by this database connection, right, then needs something to be turned into a thing that we can then use, so that the workflow is, you're saying entity register of entity store. So what is entity store of that? So you're going to say entity store of this thing, this relational database object. Is that correct? What does that mean? Tony?
That means, so in theory, the full form would be entity store or very complicated association of the database object. If you put it with just the database objects, the big association will get auto-generated.
I don't understand. I'm sorry, I don't understand. So, okay, listen, practical point. We're not going to get this done, and we're already over time for this meeting. We're not going to get this done. Tomorrow, I'm not around for half the day. We are running into a problem here, because we've got a bunch of things that need to be renamed and rearranged. Let's concentrate on those. Okay, I don't really believe in this. I'm sorry. I don't really believe this database connection thing. Okay, that's returning. Is that, if I look at the input form of that, did it?
That's nothing really complicated. Yes, there is just an association.
But it did process it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems to me that what we should be doing is, if indeed we have this thing, relational database object of that connection, and that either gives this thing here, or if it's a connection, comma, specific tables. I mean, this is assuming, you see, it doesn't make any sense, because the fact is, your inspect thing is, like, the word inspect does not suggest that it already knows what tables there are there. In order to do this with specific table names, you have to already know what the tables there are, right?
Yes, but that's much fewer information than knowing all the information about those tables.
I mean,
well, this thing is a lazy object anyway. So, I mean, what you do is you get relational database.
No, wait. Database connection is a lazy object. Relational database object is not lazy at all.
Yeah. But what database?
we could also add something like second argument of database inspect is just a number.
We need to get rid of
inspect the first three things.
We need to get rid of that function.
Let's get rid of it.
I just don't think it makes any sense.
Okay. Well, then,
I mean, it's not really fundamental. We can live without it. But one thing that this function could do, for example, the second argument can be properties, like URL read, like, it can be just directly the property. And so you can say, let me get back the table's name, like you are suggesting. Let's get back the table name. Let's get back the
So
column.
I don't understand why database connection doesn't have the capability to have properties asked of it.
But which properties? Of the database to which it connects?
I would think so, yes.
But still, and the thing is that connection is a completely, symbolic inert handle to the connection. So it's not necessarily that it's connected. And if you would be asking this directly from a connection, that would kind of mix different things together. So connection is really not, it shouldn't have this semantic load, I think. It should be something that you use to get the thing.
Ben on our live stream points out that database inspect is more like database properties, which is true.
One other thing about database inspect is that if ever we have the similar operation for other backends, then it will become less trivial, because depending on the type of the backend, it will return different types of meta objects, such as maybe whatever other objects will be for other databases with the meta information.
Yeah. But we don't have any idea what we're going to do with that yet. Okay, look. The issue here is we've got this database connection. It is like the file wrapper or the URL wrapper. It does pretty much nothing, right? Is that correct?
Well, it does certain processing, and it also is pointing frequently to some actual object, connection object that is managed.
Does it take authentication information, for example?
Yes, it does. As we just didn't do it in this example, but in general, yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a password. I mean, another thing that is doing, which is something we should probably separate if this was actually an inert wrapper, is to do the operation of connect and disconnect.
Yes. Yes. I mean, does that matter?
The connection, the actual connection, no, is done lazily, but the disconnection, you might want to do it once you're done. Otherwise, we
don't have any capability for that right now, do we? That's true. I mean, we used to have database connect. You're saying we might need a database disconnect.
Sometimes it's necessary, unless
we don't have that function, so we don't have it set up so we have any possibility of that function.
Well, what we are currently using is a string method of database connection, which is something you call to connect, to disconnect, or connect, which can be documented as a part of the database connection.
I didn't see that in the documentation.
We so far keep these things undocumented because connection management is a low-level activity, and most of the time things are handled automatically.
I don't think that's the right way to do it at all. A property of database connection that says disconnect? No way. That's not really a possible thing.
Probably not, but
no,
this is just
one. Super bad idea. Okay, let's go back around this again. Okay, so I'm just going to summarize the things that are a mess right now. Okay, so database connection and all right, so the things that we still need to sort out. Filtered entity class potentially being called selected entity class, right? Because filtered entity class is basically the same operation as select. What? And we haven't looked at this page, have we?
Nope.
Okay. The fact that that is documented as an entity function you're telling me that this can't be an ordinary function. Is that correct?
No, but it can be a property.
Well, you haven't documented that.
No.
So it can be a Boolean property, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do not like the word filtered. We have not used it elsewhere. I'm not thrilled with aggregated either.
Well, aggregated is different enough from group by that we cannot call it grouped by entity class. A filtered entity class works just like select, so we could call it selected entity class.
Except for the fact that entity function isn't a general function.
Of course, that's true throughout.
But also selected entity class sounds a little bit like it's a specific class already existing that you select.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Yeah.
All right, I'm warming to this name, although I don't particularly like it.
And about aggregated entity class, in group by, the aggregation is optional, while in aggregated entity class, the grouping is optional. So I think the name is correct.
Okay, merged entity class. We come back to this one. Combined entity class. What is it again?
It's an operation where you're basically getting two entity classes, two sets of entities, and you create new entities that contain properties from entities of both classes, both types. So you kind of merge
entities. Yeah.
You're kind of merging two types of entities into a single one. That's why we call it merged entity class.
Types of entities into a single one. What are the entities that you get out?
These are
so, Stephen, for example, you can merge country and city on capital city, and you get entities that there is one for each country in this case, and they have all the properties of the country and all the properties of the capital city.
Sorry, why is it properties of the? I don't understand. If you merged country and city, why do you get things which are part of country rather than things that are part of city?
You get both. The first and second argument are perfectly symmetrical. Another example would be, imagine you have a list of people and a list of books, and you want to merge them by authorship, and then you would get, for each person and book. So each book can have multiple authors, and each person can have authored multiple things. But for each tuple of person and book, you get all the properties of one plus all the properties of the second. And the arguments are just like join across. So if you want to follow this,
except they're not quite, because join does not accept function as a last argument.
They will do it.
Okay, what would happen if we called it combined entity class?
I think that is confusing, because the problem when you say combined entity class is that why is it combined vertically or horizontally, basically?
Yeah,
that's
I understand. Okay, so but merge doesn't help that, in my view.
No,
doesn't really help it. So what is the right term for this?
It's really a join.
Yeah, it's a join in the sense of SQL, but
yeah, it's in the sense of the Wolfram language is joined.
No, it's not. It's join across, which is a name that we got from the world of relational databases. So what is it outside of that world? What would you in everyday language call this operation? I wish there were some examples here. That would help us.
You're kind of merging the properties. So
you're not merging the properties. look, you're as much merging the properties.
No, you're joining the properties.
Well,
not
okay.
merging them.
Yeah. Well, maybe better thing to say is that you are merging entities. So you're kind of you're getting one entity from basically two previous entities, so to speak.
One entity from two previous entities. Explain that again to me.
Well, if you have, for example, the country Italy and the capital city Rome, then these were two entities which were like separate entities of different types.
Yes.
But now you are combining them and you're getting the entity that contains properties and values of those properties for both of these.
Right, but then that becomes like an entity, yes?
Yes, that becomes like an entity, but it's like an entity that's sort of a merged entity that contains both.
I understand, but this merging with respect to a property.
Yes.
That is with respect to the... No. Look, that isn't right. It's just not right. This is what you said was, take your country example. That property is a property of class 1, is it not?
Yes, but it now becomes also property.
No. But read the documentation. It's completely obscure, right? So in the case where you just said you want to take, let's say class 1 is countries, class 2 is cities, and property is capital cities of countries. Am I making sense?
Yeah, so this is a property of the country.
That's right, but that's not then a property. Then what this returns is entities that are the capital cities of countries.
But
I don't understand.
Let me give you a more. Imagine you take the countries and the cities, and instead of merging them on a property, you want to take all the cities that are closer than a certain epsilon in population to the corresponding country. There might be multiple matches, like
listen. You know what? I need some examples of this. Okay, this function. I need examples. Okay, do you have examples?
In the demo that you were actually already opening, there should be examples.
Okay, we are really running out of time here. Okay, so this is a remaining thing. This name isn't right. We need to figure out what it should be.
But did we make that decision in the filters entity class? Still not.
I'm sorry, the filtered entity class I'm okay with. The merged entity class I'm not okay with.
Okay.
Where is this?
It was called join across. Yeah.
What the heck is this doing?
This is just to represent it in the way
No, but this is making a data set out of this. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, look, there are sub-values, Stephen. That's why it's making a data set. It's making data set out of data. It's calling entity value.
I see. Okay. By the way, on this page, we should make it very clear that, gosh, we really should document things like this on this page. Okay. What is this? I don't understand. I don't understand what this is giving us. What is this? I don't understand this at all.
Why don't you evaluate it? Just write merged entity class instead of entity join across and evaluate it.
Okay, I don't know what this is doing.
Okay, so now for each person has a foreign key to nation. So we're getting, for each person, now you can access all the properties of nation. So instead of, so this case was full name and name, but you can also get, I don't know, currency, which is another property.
Is this symmetric between class 1 and class 2 or not?
Yes.
Not always.
What do you mean not always? It depends. If you don't specify left or right as the fourth argument, yes.
So what Carl is saying is that there are different types of joins.
Yeah, I
And
know.
for certain types of joins, it is symmetric.
I don't think this is the right way to think about it. I think we should be thinking about it in terms of how we can explain this to people who didn't spend years working with SQL databases.
See, and the thing is that people, as I was explaining in this demo, and there are some examples below, a lot of these things that we do with joins can be done with relations. That means walking these property paths. The point is that if somebody is familiar with this and is trying to access...
Yeah, if somebody's familiar with this, they might as well just be writing SQL.
Well, except that there are at least 4 major dialects, and they will, instead of writing SQL, they will just take something
Listen,
like Django,
if we're making a wrapper for SQL,
output.
then we should make the names exactly the same as in SQL, and it should be like the database link.
Yeah, but what I don't understand...
I don't think that's what we should do. I mean,
you can, Stephen, there are a lot of things that you can do without the need for joins. But it gets to the point where things become complex enough that you might need a join, and I don't see why you should obfuscate this concept.
We're not. We're trying to make it less obfuscated. So let's go through again what this is doing. This is saying, given the things in class 1, we are saying that there is a property of the things in class 1 that associate the things in class 1 with things in class 2. Is that correct?
Yes.
But that property is not the same property. That property, this is incorrectly written, because that property is a property of class 1.
See, and it can be the same property. In this case, this is the third usage case.
No, okay.
Yeah. But what I was explaining in that notebook, if you look just below, is that in this case, you can get rid of the join across and perform this operation much more simply using relations. Just below, not that far below.
Which relations? Where? What are you talking about?
Look. Data set of entity value, person, full name, entity function, blah, blah, blah. That one.
Yes.
Returns exactly the same data set. So it can be done more simply if you walk the properties.
What the heck is this? What is this? Yeah. What is that?
Oh, that has been renamed. Now that is called nation entity.
Okay, but I mean that's just a thing. That's just some random field in some table of the database.
No, that's an auto-generated name for the random field in the table is called nation. And
wait. There's a new concept. The concept that we have string.
It's not a new concept. See, and we talked about it. I mean, we've been going on with this for 2 hours, and we are all super tired. We went through this 3 weeks ago. It's not a new concept.
Where is it documented?
It's not yet documented, but you went through the names. You said you didn't like relation, and we renamed it to entity. So that is, when there is a foreign key, the naked foreign key is called nation. And when you are pointing, you're addressing it with the entity head so that you can actually keep extracting properties. That is going to be called nation-entity.
Why is it done as part of the string name? Why is that not something that has a symbolic wrapper?
Because properties have string names. And this should behave just like any property.
Well, there are properties like dated that do not, that have a symbolic
dated is not a separate property. It's just a qualifier for property.
Okay, but isn't this a qualifier as well?
No, it's a separate property. You might want to extract them separately. And there are cases where there is no original property you can piggyback on because it's the reverse relation.
Okay.
So anyway, with the machinery of relation, you can get rid of joins in many cases. And that's one of the biggest selling points of frameworks like Django, for example. Django didn't have explicit joins at the beginning because you can do a lot of things without them. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Okay, all right. So listen, we've got the first thing we need to do next time is to unscramble this database connection, database inspect, relational database object thing. Okay?
Yeah.
My feeling is that the right way to do this is to have a database connect and a database disconnect, if that's what you in fact want.
No, that's really not needed because the connection is lazy. So only when you're performing an entity value call, then you connect. But usually it stays disconnected.
On the other hand, disconnect might be necessary, otherwise sometimes database gets blocked.
Okay, but
okay, I just add those topics for discussion for the next meeting, and I already asked Alex to schedule the meeting this week.
It has to be. Look, listen. It's not just this week. This is going to hold up this release if we don't get this sorted out. So this probably has to be tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, so which means he's going to have to rearrange a ton of stuff.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I will see you guys. And for people on the live stream, we're about to actually start another discussion about neural networks, and which will also be live streamed. And you're very welcome to join us. And I will push back all the stuff from this. And okay, if you can have a think about this database connection thing and try and inspect and so on, and try and come up with a suggestion, that will be really helpful. Because this sequence that you're showing me of entity register, I mean, essentially, that is a really horrifying sequence, because what you're doing there, this entity register of entity store, I mean, basically, the full stack is entity register of entity store of database inspect of database connection.
I think you can just pass. You can just pass database. If you're not trying to do anything fancy, you can pass database connection directly to entity store.
Okay, that makes more sense.
But the thing is that
why not?
There are databases. And there are databases out there which have hundreds of tables. And just
I understand. So why not put in the database
connection
wrapper? Why not put the thing that says? Why not put in database connections? Say which tables you care about.
No. That's definitely the wrong place, because database connection is just the place where you put the URL and
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you, because otherwise, look at what's going to happen here. Otherwise, what you've got to do is you're going to say relational database.
I wouldn't mind having extra argument in the relational database object to do this kind of stuff.
Sorry, but then what it looks like is that, which is really weird.
Actually, you know what?
Yeah,
we could reverse, since the full form of the relational database object as database connection as the second argument. Maybe we can have a relational database object be its own constructor, and you pass it a list of, in the first argument, a list of the tables you want inspected.
I think this is what Stephen was suggesting at the beginning. And yeah, we can think about it tomorrow and figure out.
I just don't like the fact that this has multiple different concepts in it, right? If we could just do, if it was just this, okay, database connection of that, comma, tables or whatever. That would be, to me, a fairly clean piece of code, which actually means something.
Well, what about if we put it in the entity store first argument?
Not first argument, not the first argument.
But Stephen, the problem with this is that one and the same connection can be used in different circumstances to extract different sets of tables.
Okay. Well, okay, so then here's another suggestion. Okay, here's another suggestion. What about this?
That could probably work.
Wait a second. Doesn't database connection have sub-values for extracting properties? Ricardo?
I don't know.
Right now it does.
Okay, listen. Think about this, guys. But think about this whole sequence here, because it doesn't, something like this seems civilized and makes some sense. By the time you've got this in the middle, at least that name doesn't make much sense to me. And this sure doesn't make sense. Database inspect sounds like it's going to bring up some GUI, and that absolutely doesn't make sense in this stack.
Stephen, entity store already can take a list of tables in the first argument to filter out the things. So, I mean, it's already. I don't know if it's documented, but no, it's not documented for this. But if you look at the structure of the entity store, which probably was in that demo as well, you can decide to have an entity store which only cares about a few of the tables. And so we can actually optimize the things so that we don't inspect.
Actually, the obvious thing to do, look, with this entity store of type, it's a one argument form. We could have an initial argument, which is a database that is an optional initial argument. I don't like the idea of having these disembodied tables as the first argument. So in other words, the way it would look is you could say entity store of database, comma, tables.
No, we already have that. It's just the other way around.
No, I'm saying I think it should be this way round. Because entity store right now can just be a type, right? But that's the case where it's in memory and it doesn't need to specify.
Yeah, but what we had decided is that the database object, whatever it is, the connection, is the second argument of the entity store. And if you look down, can you please scroll down?
Yes, and I agree that somehow choosing a specific backend is the optional operation in the second argument. So that would be my preference.
Can you scroll down in that demo notebook?
I gotta go. I've got to go. I'm sorry. To be continued, hopefully tomorrow. Okay? All right. See you all soon. Bye.